Hello and what is up, my world of YouTube? This is your boy Hidden Angel Lionheart coming to you live with another deck profile. In today's deck we're going to be doing my favorite fusion deck of all time, except for Cyber Dragons because, well, it's Cyber Dragons. Anyway, we are going to be doing a Despia Albaz branded deck profile for y'all, and I am super excited about this because if you remembered in one of my videos I had mentioned I had actually stated that I was going to be doing a video on this deck, and I finally got everything figured out, and believe it or not, this is the same deck I use in Master Duel, believe it or not, and there's only 3 cards that I don't use, which is Banned, the Unhealthy Max, Non-Vitamin C, might I mention, and in today's meta, that card would be severely broken, and honestly, Konami, I hope to God you do not ever bring that card back, because if you do, it's going to be a freaking problematic headache, and even Ash Blossom is going to have problem nuking that insect every turn if you just so happen to hard draw all 3 copies, and it's just like, yeah, I'm gonna hate this. But anyway, we're going to get straight into the deck profile. As you can see, we have the side deck, or wait, the extra deck and the side deck. I got those confused, my fault. So extra deck choices were kind of interesting on my part. I will get to that later. Extra deck, definitely very bombing. But since the new 10s came out, as you guys saw me open in that last video, this deck honestly is probably the most cheapest and affordable deck with no question at all. Everything got nerfed in price, which is a plus. So without further ado, let us get started. So starting off with the monsters, we are playing 3 of this lovely lady, Aluber, the Jester of Despia, and believe it or not, Aluber is a woman if you ever see the token card to it, or it's just a very attractive dude that looks like a frickin' woman. Again, BTS, man, people, BTS. Anyway, basically what Aluber does whenever it is normal or special summon, she basically searches your deck for any branded spell or trap from your deck and adds it straight to your hand, and this is a once per turn effect, so it's an amazing search. And there's one other card in this deck that acts as another Aluber, and you only play 1 copy of it, but we'll get to that later. And then we're only playing 2 copies of Despia Tragedy. Now, what Despia Tragedy does is it has 2 unique effects, and they both can trigger off disregarding if you want to banish it from the graveyard. Like, yeah, it's still going to get its effects off. Basically, what this card does is it's the opposite of Aluber. Instead of adding the Despia spell and traps, you add the Despia monsters from your deck to your hand. You can choose to add any Despia monster from your deck straight to your hand as soon as it hits the graveyard by a card effect or due to a card effect. Or, so anyway, if you ditch it from field to graveyard for a link summon or anything like that, it ain't going to work. Now, if you use a fusion spell to fuse it, yeah, that's by card effect. Discarding it from the hand by card effect also activates. Activating it, fusing it from the deck with another card like Branded Fusion, it also triggers the effect. Now the second effect is if you banish this card, or if it is banished by said card effect like Allure Darkness or whatever, you still get the first effect off regardless. And then the second effect is if you willingly banish it from the graveyard, you're able to search your graveyard for any branded spell or trap and set it straight back to your field, ready to be used. So say if you activate a Branded Fusion, you can immediately reset it back to the field to use it next turn, so that way you get a +4 Branded Fusions instead of a +3, but technically since you're playing 2 Tragedy, you're getting 5 Branded Fusions instead of 3, so when you think about it, Despian Tragedy is a tragedy amongst most artists, as we shall say. Anyway, then we are only playing 1 of the Despian Dramaturge. Now, I have considered playing this card at 3 or 2, but honestly, it's too good to the point where running it at 2 is just too much, and 3 is just super hardcore cloggy. And once per turn, if you happen to fuse this card into the graveyard, if it gets banished for a fusion, you can immediately special summon it back to the field. And once per turn, also, when your opponent decides to Fusion Xyz, Synchro Summon, or Link Summon into any other monster, it immediately activates the effect of where you can target that selected monster and it loses its card effects completely, or for that whole remainder of the turn. So basically, it's the kissing cousin of Dragon's Tapelia when you think about it, except putting a counter for continuous, no effects. You basically get the one turn, nope effect for the most part. So there's that. And then we're playing one copy of the Ad Libitum of Despia. Basically what Ad Libitum does, when it is fusion summoned or used as fusion material and sent to the graveyard by fusion effect, you are able to search your graveyard for a level 8 or any Despia fusion monster or Despia monster from your deck and immediately special summon it back to the field. And then also, if this card is on the field, you gain 100 attack points based on the levels of your monsters on the field. So say if you have Tragedy out on the field, its level would go, since it's a level 1, it only gain 100 attack points. So instead of being 400 attack, it would be 500. So that's the rough way of putting it. And then to finish up our Despia engine, we are running one Despian comedy. Basically, as the name says, he's a jokester, he's a comedy. And basically what he does is, besides cracking horrible jokes, when he's in the graveyard, if you control a level 8 fusion monster or any fusion monster regardless, you can basically sack that monster to bring him back to the field. So say if your opponent was going to try and use Super Poly or whatever, or Fallen of Albaz for target, you could immediately tribute that fusion monster and chain that with comedy to where it wouldn't, the effect would not resolve, so Albaz would not get its target, and Super Poly, actually, yeah, no effects can be activated when Super Poly is activated, so you're kind of screwed on that. But yeah, if they try to target your fusion monster, say if you get Toon Worlded, or if they try to Toon World one of your monsters and use the Comic Hand to steal it, because Comic Hand is such a douchebag card to deal with in Toon Worlds. Ugh. And the fact that I'm getting the cards for my nephew Wyatt, shout out to Wyatt, and hopefully he watches this video long enough to hear I gave him a shout out. He is going to realize just how much his uncle loves him because of how freaking expensive the entire freaking deck is. It's like a $500, $600 deck, but I'm getting pieces little by little, so that way his deck will probably be completed by Christmas, hopefully. But anyway, that's it for the Despia engine for the deck, and we are going to move straight on into the next set of cards. And for our next set of engine, we are playing Triple Fallen of Albaz. Basically, what this card does is also, fun fact, this deck happens to fusion summon 17 times if possible. If any of your effects are negated, you can still fusion summon like a mofo. Now, how that is possible is we already have the first fusion engine right here as Fallen of Albaz. When he immediately is summoned or special summoned to the field, you can discard one card from hand. He's a walking Super Poly, but it can be countered. So therefore, if your opponent wanted to Super Poly on him, it would cancel out the effect for sure. But then again, if you were to Super Poly on him, it would be kind of yeah, that'd be a really awkward, considering, again, as I said, the moment you summon or special summon him, you discard a card from hand. He's basically a walking Super Poly. You can fuse with monsters on either side of the field, so therefore, that card's pretty much self-explanatory. They are playing one copy of Albion, the Shrouded Dragon. Whenever he's in the graveyard, he is treated as Fallen of Albaz, which is amazing because most of the cards need Fallen of Albaz in the graveyard, like Branded Fusion, as target, or Branded in, actually, yeah, Branded in Red does, I don't, actually, wait. Yeah, Branded in Red also targets Fallen of Albaz, so he's just great for target without question, and the fact he's a level 8 and you can make him or fuse him with any of your other monsters that's in your extra deck, which is really freaking amazing. And he has two effects. The one, basically, if he is in your hand or in your graveyard, you can send a branded card from your deck to the graveyard. So say, for instance, if you wanted to send Branded in White, because when Branded in White is basically sent to the graveyard, it can basically reset itself back to the field during the end phase of the turn that it was sent to the graveyard due to card effect. So therefore, this card combined with Branded in White just shows a lot of potential, and it does create a lot of openings as soon as the turn is over, of course. And then also, as the effect also states, if this card just so happens to be in your hand, you can special summon this card instead, or if you are sending it to the deck, place this card on the bottom of the deck. Then if this card is placed from your deck, you can draw one card. So in other words, you're breaking him back to deck to draw a card, or if he's in your hand, you can just special summon him. But it's vice versa, honestly, depending on your choice. So anyway, on to the rest of our engine. We are going to go with the Golden Sword Soul. We are only playing one copy of this guy. Now, basically what he does is, and forgive me, I do kind of have a blonde moment with this card. Basically what he does is when a monster declares an attack, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, negate that attack. And if you control a fusion summon monster that has Fallen of Albaz in its card text, you can destroy the monster that had declared that attack. That would have to suck, without question. It's basically a walking single target widespread ruin, but then again, or Mirror Force, widespread ruin, you guys get the gist. And after that is all said and done and all dandy, if this card just so happens to be banished face up during the damage step, you can banish this card, or wait, no. If a monster is banished face up except during the damage step, so say Fallen of Albaz or whatever, you can banish this card from your field or graveyard to then special summon a light spellcaster type monster from your hand or graveyard whose attack equals its own defense, and you can only use the effect of Golden Soul Sword once per turn. So therefore, in other words, you have to have another spellcaster of the same defense as that monster, which we are going to get to because of reprints. And then we are playing only one copy of the Spriggan's Kit. Now, if you guys remember when I said there was another Eluber in the deck, basically Spriggan's Kit is that card. If you control a fusion summon monster on your field, you can special summon this card from hand to field as long as that card lists Fallen of Albaz in it as a fusion material. And once special summoned or normal summoned, you search your deck for any branded card and you add it straight to your hand. So again, that's 4 Elubers, that's 4 searches, and this is like a 45 card deck, so all those cards, yeah, the fact that it has 5+ extra, you're going to be getting all kinds of pluses if you open with the correct hand, and let me tell you, you are getting all kinds of pluses, and there's no backfire to any of this as far as I'm concerned, unless your opponent's playing a lot of Ghost Ogres, frickin' Ghost Bell, Ghost Ogre and Sam. Yeah, but that's about it. In case I did miss something, yada. Oh, yeah, okay. And then once you add card from deck to hand, you then have to place one card from your hand or on the bottom of the deck, and you can only use the effect of Spriggan's Kit once per turn. That was the downside. I mean, you get a surge off, but then you get to send a card back from deck or hand to deck. So say, for instance, if you open with a branded Tragedy, or Despian Tragedy, why is he branded? Well, then again, yeah, branded is a tragedy, and tragedy itself is a tragedy. So, therefore, Spriggan's Kit, if you open with Despian Tragedy, you play the kit, activate kit, you send Tragedy back to deck, and then play the branded fusion. You would then fuse Albaz with Tragedy, and then Tragedy will get the effect to search off for another monster, of course, and then you would bring the Eluber, then summon the Eluber, either the Eluber to add another branded card from deck to hand. So therefore, there's all kinds of pluses. Like, the pluses are inevitable. Also, for the final card, we only play one copy of the Tri-Brigade Mercurier. Now you're probably wondering, why is it only at 1? Because, honestly, playing it at 2 or 3 is just really cloggy, and the fact this deck is so freaking good as it is, it's just kind of hard to maneuver what cards you want, especially by trying to add another Mercurier. I would love to, but it's very complicated, and you're going to see why with more of the choices I have. Anyway, when your opponent declares, or when your opponent activates a monster effect, declares a monster effect, while you control a fusion monster that, of course, lists Fallen of Albaz as a fusion material, and it is a quick effect, you can then send this card from hand to graveyard to negate that effect. So basically, this is an Omni-Negate in the hand if you control a Fallen of Albaz for a monster. Oh wait, no, it's a Monster Negate. Why was I thinking Omni-Negate? My fault. But, yeah, and then also, you can also banish this card, I think, or am I jumping too far ahead? Okay, yeah, negate the effect. And if this card is banished, you can then add from your deck to hand a Fallen of Albaz or one monster that mentions it. So therefore, you can basically add the Golden Soul Sword, you can add the Albion, you can add the kit. So regardless, if this card just so happens to be banished, you get a free search. So, as I said, the pluses are endless in this deck. So then, for the last of our engine, for the Albaz engine, we are playing one copy of Incredible Ecclesia the Virtuous. So then again, like I said, when Golden Soul Sword is banished, you're able to bring her back from graveyard to field, which is kind of pointless. Well, there is, but it isn't pointless at the same time. Because, okay, anyway. Ecclesia is basically a walking cyber dragon. If your opponent controls monsters and you do not, you can special summon her from your hand. And what she does is, once per turn, you can sack her. And this is quick effect, so you can activate this, as it says, quick effect during any part of the turn, of your turn or your opponent's turn. And oh my gosh, if you guys are friends with me on Master Duel, there's one video where I freaking big-brained somebody with Virtuous Ecclesia, and he was stuck to the point where he could not do anything except basically suicide himself. It was freaking funny. Because I basically used her effect to summon the Albaz, then used Albaz to fuse with one of his monsters, and I think I made the Dragon's Despia or Titanic Clad. I forget which of the two, because I already controlled Masquerade, Mirror Jade, and I think I had a Dragon's Despia on the field. It's just, there was no outing that board. There was no outing it. And the fact Titanic Clad was almost at 4,000 attack points because of said fusion target. Yeah, it was a bad day for this person. He literally took his monster, and it was a mirror match. He took his Aluber and just crashed into one of my monsters and basically killed himself. So that was that story. But anyway, and if also, as I go to say, if you just so happen to lose a fusion monster on the field and get sent to the graveyard, you can special summon her back from graveyard back to field. So not only does she sack herself to search for a Fawn of Albaz to either add it to hand or special summon it to the field, if you have a fusion monster and it's destroyed on the field, she gets brought back to the field regardless. So that's that. And that is it for our Albaz engine. And honestly, as you guys can see, the deck is honestly very solid. It's very good. And there's really rarely ever any contingency problems. Like, there's never any problems at all. And I probably used the wrong word to word that. But yeah, that is that. But that is it for Albaz. Then for our other cards, we are playing only 2 Ash Blossom. And she's self-explanatory. If your opponent tries to add cards from deck to hand, or if they try to branded fusion even, or send cards from deck to special summon a monster or draw a card, you can basically discard her to stop that effect. So again, she is probably the most generic, most used, most seen hand trap of the century, and the fact she's getting another reprint with the Rainbow Overdrive deck that just now got released, or is getting released within the next couple weeks, I do believe. It's going to be a very popular structure deck to the point you are not going to find it in stores, because it comes with commons of her and common Ghost Bell. So yeah, you're not going to see that structure deck. If you do, you snag those and do not look back, because you're mainly wanting them not only for the new Crystal Beast stuff, but you are also wanting it for all of the generic hand traps like her and Ghost Bell, as I said. And then to wrap things up, we're only playing 2 copies of the Genku's of the, I about butchered that, Jizukiru, the Star-Destroying Kaiju. That's self-explanatory. Kaiju, you sacrifice monster on field to put this on field. So also, combo with this, if your opponent controls a monster and you don't like it, or if it's an opposite element of, like, say, you're facing a Harpy deck in their wind, a Marincess deck in their water, a Solomon Great their fire, you get the gist. You would want to sack him to play the Kaiju, and then summon Albaz, or summon Virtuous, activate Virtuous to summon the Albaz, and Albaz would trigger off to target this to go into a Titanic Clad. So that's actually a little combo tip that I actually thought of, and it actually works pretty great. And the fact that it's like a level 10, I believe. Actually, yeah, let me double check that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, level 10. 10 and 4 is 1400 attack for Titanic Clad, so therefore you have a 4K beat stick pretty much for the most part, even though it's 3900. But yeah, that's it for all the monsters. As you guys can see, we're going to move these out of the way because it's like that. We are playing 1 copy of the field spell Despia, Theater of the Branded, or as my friend Josh likes to call it, Theater with No Parking. And basically what this card does is, it is a continuous once per turn fusion polymerization, to where you're fusing monsters from your hand or field to get out other monsters, of course, from extra deck to field to fusion summon. And if said monster just so happens to be destroyed, you can actually, this is the second effect of it, and let me see if I remember this correctly, or is destroyed during battle, you can target a level 8 or higher fusion monster in your graveyard and then special summon it. So therefore, it's basically a monster reborn for fusion monsters that are level 8 or higher. So if they're destroyed in battle or destroyed by a card effect, etc., etc., you guys get the gist. It basically brings it back to the field. And then we're playing 3 copies of the most broken fusion spell in all of history right now. It is Branded Fusion. This card is self-explanatory. Once per turn, you can use this card, and what it does is you basically search your deck for fusion materials or in your hand, and send materials from deck or hand to graveyard to fusion summon. So therefore, as I said, 45 card deck, you play Branded Fusion, you're already getting a +2 for a fusion summon, and then for Tragedy, you're searching for a Luber. A Luber would then come out to field, you would then fusion summon into a Lebellion using Albaz and Tragedy. Lebellion gets its effect, you discard a card, and Albaz would send itself back to deck. Lebellion sends itself back to extra deck. You summon the Mirror Jade, and then you go to a Luber. A Luber would then trigger off to search for the field spell or any of the other branded cards. So therefore, if you're bringing back Branded in red, even for an example, or you bring Branded in white, you're basically fusing off. Well, then again, Branded in white only works with Fallon of Albaz, so you only work with that. So then after that, you would want to go into either Branded of red. As I said, since it brings back a Despia monster, you can either keep it in hand and not fusion summon, or fusion summon that turn, so you can fuse the Aluber and with the Tragedy, and then they go to Banish Zone. So then after Banished, you could go into the Masquerade, so that would also to where your opponent would be losing 600 life points each turn, or vice versa. Go into the Despia Corrites, if they summon a level 8 or non-fusion monster, they are losing attack points regardless. And then after that, if Tragedy is banished because Brandon in red banishes target, you can reset Brandon in red so that way you get another fusion off. I hope you followed all that. But anyway, yeah, that is basically what Branded Fusion does. It is the most broken fusion spell in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! At this point. Then we are playing 3 copies of the Branded Opening, and I must give Caleb a shout out to you, brother, because he hooked me up with the 3 branded openings. What this card basically does is you're ditching a card to add another Despian monster from your deck to hand, and this is a once per turn thing. So again, this is another broken spell card for sure. Then we are playing only 1 copy of the Branded in red. It is a Monster Reborn back to your hand to bring a Despia monster back to hand, and then after such effect, you can then fusion summon or not fusion summon at all to fusion summon into any card, of course, as long as you have materials on field or hand to fuse for, of course. And then afterwards, if this card is used during your turn, the second turn being your turn when you can attack, if you fusion summon the monster that turn, you won't be able to attack. So this is more of a go first card for sure to use, so that way you're building up your board and you're getting all the stuff you need to be able to mess up your opponent and just give them a very bad day, which is really nice. And then we are playing 1 copy of the Branded in white. This card is only a target for Albaz, of course, to fusion summon any monster that lists Albaz in its name. Using Albaz from hand, field, or graveyard, which is amazing. It's basically a miracle fusion for only Albaz himself, or of course. And it banishes targets, of course, and if this card is sent to graveyard due to card effects, so as I said, if you trigger Albion, send this to graveyard during the end phase, Brandon in white can come back and basically set itself back to the field. So that's basically the plus with this card. And even if it gets destroyed by your opponent's card effect, this card will still come back regardless. So no matter what you do, it still comes back. And then for the rest of the branded support, we have the new spell card Branded Lost. Basically what Branded Lost does is, as long as it's on the field, fusion monsters cannot be interrupted with their card effects, so their card effects go off regardless. So if your opponent tries the Veiler, a fusion monster, it won't work. If your opponent tries to Ash Blossom, a fusion monster with a card effect, it won't work. So therefore, they are immune to having their effects negated, which is a freaking plus. Also, if you just so happen to fusion summon a monster this turn also, you can add a Fallen of Albaz or one monster that lists Fallen of Albaz in its card text. So that's it for the branded spell engine. Of course, we have more, and we'll be getting to that very shortly, I promise you. But, oh crap. And then for the rest of the other spells, we are playing, and I only play 2 Super Polys. Of course, this card cannot be interrupted once it's activated. You can target monsters on your opponent's field. So if you wanted to go into your own Starving Venom or Dragon Stapelia and you're facing a dark deck, or if you're mirror matching, you can fuse those cards to make your Dragon Stapelia or your Starving Venom. And that's basically what Super Poly is mainly for, unless you just want to be a real douche and use it to fuse an Albaz with one of their monsters if they just so happen to intervened and stopped the fusion from happening with Albaz. So it's just like, oh, you wanted to do that? I set one card, pass turn, you play your cards, okay. By the way, Super Poly, and of course, this card cannot be interrupted, it cannot be disturbed at all, so therefore this card basically says screw you regardless. But yeah, Super Poly, only play 2 copies. 3 honestly is just way too cloggy for me. And of course, when I'm playing 2 copies of the Allure of Darkness, I did have it at 3, but 3 was just too much, and 2 honestly is just the perfect number in my opinion. And you basically draw 2 cards to banish a dark monster, so therefore that card is great combo with either the Golden Sword Soul, wow, I say that 10 times fast, like I just did. And you would then fuse, or not fuse, you would either want to send him, actually no, you can't send him because he's a light attribute. You have to send a dark attribute. So then again, like I said, if you happen to send the Tragedy still gets its effects off. So that would basically be the main card you want to target for. And then we are only playing 1 copy of the newly reprinted, Greater Polymerization. And now, what this card does is, of course, fusion summon 1 fusion monster from your extra deck using 3 or more monsters from your hand or field as fusion material. And if you do, it gains one of the effects, so it's basically a lightning vortex with a twist. Notice, twist, fusion, get it? Anyway, this card cannot be destroyed by card effects, so of course, there is a question I need to ask, and I need people to leave a comment in the comment section below, or if Caleb is listening, I need you to answer this question for me, buddy. Okay, so yeah, that's the first effect. Then the second effect is, if this card that was fusion summoned, if you choose this effect, happens to attack a defense position monster, it basically gains piercing. So it either has the ability to be absolutely negated by all card effects, or it can be a heavy piercer. So imagine using this to make a frickin'ly overpowered Dark Lord Morningstar or Predaplant Triviatanium, or however you pronounce its name. I probably butchered it, knowing me. And then we are playing 1 Monster Reborn, self-explanatory, Reborn the Monster, bringing back 1 monster from graveyard to field from either player's graveyard, of course. And then we are playing the 1 Raigeki to just nuke the opponent's monsters just to go for a quick win. And then we are playing 1 copy of Polymerization, and it's the dual terminal rare, as you guys can see. Really pretty. Can't lie about that. And yeah, this is where I get a certain question called in later on. And then we are playing only 1 copy of Called by the Grave, because Called by the Grave is mandatory, and that card is just freaking stupid again. And that's it for the rest of the spell engine, because again, Branded Despia is probably the most broken deck aside from Tearlaments, and that deck can screw off, honestly, because I honestly hate it that much. And that deck is just super freaking hard to beat unless you got Necro Valley, or if you're playing the Bird Flu, in this case, Flunderies, because that is a horrible matchup. And then for generic traps, you're playing 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. If you control no monsters on your field, you can immediately activate this card to disrupt a card effect on your opponent's side of the field that's a monster. And if this card is set and you activate it to target monster, it completely negates or locks out the zone or the back row of the spot that this card was placed. So say if your opponent, okay, this is your monster. Your opponent has a monster right here, and they have a set monster, or a set card right here and a monster, and you just so happen to have Infinite Impermanence behind it. You activate Impermanence, that monster loses its effect, and the back row is cannot gain effects. So say, for instance, if you don't even have that back row card, or they didn't, and they got to activate Monster Reborn or something, Infinite Impermanence basically says, no, this zone is invalid. You cannot activate anything, or it will just be discontinued, not activated. Bye-bye, sayonara, do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Go straight to jail in that aspect. But yes, that is how that works. And then here comes the last of the fusion card, is Branded Banishment, the brand new trap card, which is basically another Super Poly trap. Now, as I said, if you paid attention to all the fusion cards I have, this makes 15, but then with Tragedy, that would make basically 17. And what this trap basically does is you can target a Despia monster or a level 8 or higher fusion monster in your graveyard to special summon it, and then apply the effect of fusion summon a level 8 or higher fusion monster from your extra deck by banishing fusion materials listed on it from either side of the field, and you can only use the effect of branded banishment once per turn. So again, that's basically 7 frickin' super polys. So yeah, that's it for the whole main deck, as you guys can basically figure out. And then now to the extra deck. We are playing 1 copy of the Despia and Querites. You only need 1 copy of it because running more than 1 is just unnecessary, honestly, unless you're playing Branded Disciple Engine, which is honestly not that good, to be honest. And basically what it does is if your opponent controls no fusion monsters at all, and if you just so happen to only have level 8 fusion monsters or higher, this basically nukes the attack points all the way down to 0, so this card does win you games if you're going up against Sword Soul, Penguin Synchro, Speedroids even, and just other cards that aren't fusion. It goes straight to target, even Xyz decks, Link decks, etc, etc, etc. You guys get the gist. And if this card is happened to destroyed by your opponent's card effect, or, yeah, by a card effect, you can special summon a Fallen of Albaz or a Despia monster from your deck, and you can only use the effect of Despia and Querites once per turn. So he's basically another Virtuous Ecclesia, but however, instead of it sacking itself to special summon, it has to be destroyed by a card effect. Not by battle, but by card effect. So that's where it gets tricky with him. And then we're playing 2 copies of the Albion, the Branded Dragon. I have considered putting him at 1, but 2 is honestly really great because, again, now that I think about it, this deck does have like plus 20 ways to fusion summon, and this is one of them. As soon as he hits the field, you can basically fusion summon a fusion monster by using fusion materials on your hand, field, and graveyard. So you're banishing stuff from graveyard or just sending stuff from hand or field to graveyard to fusion summon again for that turn. So Branded Fusion into Albion, you play the Albion. Albion would then activate. You would banish whatever you used in your main deck. So, of course, you're getting all kinds of crazy combos off, for sure. Then we are playing 2 copies of Masquerade, the Blazing Dragon. Also, I forgot to mention, if Albion is sent to the graveyard, by any means necessary, you can search your deck and you can add to your hand or set a branded spell trap card from your deck to the field. So that's that effect. What Masquerade does is he basically, every time your opponent activates a card effect, you can normal summon a monster and the effect would activate. He could activate a hand trap and the effect would trigger. Your opponent is constantly losing 600 life points per turn. And it's not a once per turn thing, it is every time. So they're constantly losing life points, and since we play 2, if you just so happen to control 2, and imagine playing 3, about that, you're basically burning him for almost 2k life points to the point where he can end himself in turn 1 if he doesn't figure out how to get the Masquerades off the field. And let me tell you what, dealing with 1 is... reasonable. Dealing with 2 is a headache, and dealing with 3 is I either end his field or I kiss my life points goodbye. So, you can only imagine, it does not end well if you have 3 Masquerades on the field. And then we are playing 2 copies of the brand new boss monster, and probably one of the best boss monsters in all the Albaz fusions, is the new Mirror Jade, the Ice Blade Dragon, I think? Ice Blade Dragon, that's it. And what he does is, the moment he is fusion summoned to the field, like, it doesn't even have to be when he's fusion summoned to the field. Quick effect, you can target any monster on the field, and you can immediately banish it for that turn once per turn. And you can only use that effect once every turn. So say, for instance, if it's back to your turn, its effect is skipped to where you have to wait to your following turn. So not the next. So say, for instance, if you activate it turn 1 and it's now turn 2 for you, which is turn 3, you can't activate it, so you wait till turn 5 and then you can activate the effect again. It's very confusing, but after you've used it a few times, even if you guys play the Despia deck in Master Duel and you've tried testing it out, you know exactly what I'm talking about and you'll figure it out real quick. It's very, very simple. I mean, it was a little tricky for me to figure out at first, but it works out for the best. But anyway, when Mirror Jade can be used as target, you have to target a Fusion, Xyz, Link, or Synchro monster on either side of the field and a Fallen of Albaz. So say, for instance, if you just so happen to have Fallen of Albaz and you're going up against a heavy Fusion, Link, Synchro, or Xyz deck, you'd play Albaz. Albaz would trigger off to get into your Mirror Jade like that, which is actually really great. And again, there's another way to get this card out on the field, and that would be with my boy Lubellion, the Searing Dragon. He's basically an Albion with a twist. When he is fusion summoned to the field, his effect immediately activates, but instead of Albion where you don't have to do anything, when Lubellion is summoned, you basically discard a card from hand to activate his effect. So if you just so happen to have Tragedy and you use an Albion and an Albaz, you can fuse either of those two with him to make the Mirror Jade. And when Lubellion fuses, the monsters you use for that fusion summon go back to your deck and extra deck. So since Mirror Jade is a 1 of 4 targets, that card would go back to the extra deck. So therefore, Lubellion, you play Lubellion, you ditch a monster, hopefully it's Tragedy to get the extra plus off, to send this back to your extra deck, and then you would then send the Albaz or the Albion back to your main deck to fusion summon into the Mirror Jade. So you're basically getting your stuff back as you're fusion summoning, which is really nice. And then we are only playing one copy of the Alba Lanitas, the Abyss Dragon. This card is honestly really beautiful. Can't go wrong there. Now, this card also, and this actually is probably the one you'll probably least fusion summon into, because once it is special summoned by sending the above cards in the monster zones to the graveyard, this card can attack monsters by... Okay, yeah. By the number of battle phase. So this is confusing. So if you just so happen to basically... okay, yeah, this is the part that confused me. This card can attack monsters a number of times each battle phase. So basically, this is a new wording of saying you can attack monsters on your opponent's field once per turn. So it's basically a Chimera Takeover Dragon, in a sense, if you guys want to use that as an example. And also, once per turn, during the end phase, if this card was just so happen to send to the graveyard because it was there this turn, like Albion, you can add a Polymerization normal spell or a fusion normal spell from your deck to your hand. So it's a fusion search. So that's another way to get into your brand of fusion or to your Polymerization to get into your other stuff. But that is... And then we run the one Titanic Clad, the Ash Dragon. When he is special summoned to the field, he immediately gains the levels of the monsters that it fused to create him. So again, as I said, if you fuse the Kaiju with the Albaz, that's level 4 and 10, that's 14, that's 1400, and Titanic Clad has 2500 attack, so 25 plus 14 is 39, so therefore you still got a 4k beat stick. And then if Titanic Clad is sent to the graveyard at all at some point, and it's the end of the turn, and he basically is able to allow you to either special summon or search for a Fallen of Albaz or a Dogmatica card, and either summon it to the field or add it to your hand. So that is the plus. That is it for our Despia and monsters and the Albaz monster engine. But we are going to go into the other stuff. We are playing the one Guardian Chimera. Yeah, this is probably the most expensive card in this deck that I just happened to get back from Caleb again. Thank you, Caleb. Shout out to you, Caleb, that I can play this card. And basically, okay, this card is absolutely bananas and bonkerly crazy. This card is, the moment it's fusion summoned, you are able to draw cards from your deck up to the number of the materials used to fusion summon into it, and then you are allowed to pop a card on your opponent's side of the field. And then get this, if this is where it got confusing. Greater Polymerization, I don't know if it still treats itself as Polymerization, but regular Polymerization, so again, you would probably want to use him for that search. He is completely immune to being targeted by card effects as long as there's a Polymerization in your graveyard. So therefore, he is absolutely immune to every card effect unless you can Kaiju him or get over his attack strength. So, or just... it's a ridiculous monster. He's very powerful, very overpowered, very strong for sure. And honestly, there's no wonder why he's worth like $50 at this point, honestly, that I last saw. But then we're playing the one Dragon Stapelia. It's very self-explanatory. One dark monster and a fusion monster. Once per turn, you can quick effect. You can target a monster in your opponent's field to add a predator counter. It loses its effects and its level is reduced to 1. And as long as that predator counter remains on that monster can't do anything for nothing. So it's useless. And then You're running the 1 Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, self-explanatory, 2 Dark Monsters on the field. It can target a special summon monster on your opponent's side of the field that was summoned from the extra deck, gain its effects, and gain its attack points for that turn. And also, if this card is happened destroyed by battle, you can destroy all the special summon monsters on your opponent's side of the field. And then for the last of the fusion cards, we're playing the 1 Garura Wings of Resonant Life. Now, this card is honestly very weak, but get this. Basically, it takes 2 monsters of the same type and attribute, but with different names. They're 2 monsters with the same type and attribute, of course. Anyway, any battle damage your opponent takes from battles involving this card, you basically are dealing double the damage. So it has 1,500 attack points. That 15 doubles to 3,000. So therefore, if you're swinging with him and their field is wide open, you're hitting them pretty hard for sure. And then after that, if this card just so happens to get destroyed or sent to the graveyard, vice versa, you are able to draw a card for that turn once per turn. So that is it for the Fusion Engine. As you guys can see, this deck is already very scary and very dangerous. As you can see, in the lineup of monsters I've selected are honestly very top tier. I'm not going to lie. And then my side deck, honestly, holy crap, it's about to thunderstorm. And as you guys can tell, this deck is very scary. This deck is very powerful. And I pity anybody that goes up against it that isn't prepared for it, honestly. Alright, then for the last of the side deck, we are running 2 Dramaturge, because again, as I said, I was very iffy with it. But then again, at 2, it's honestly good for sure, because and plus you have a 1 in 2 chance or a 1 in 3 chance, it's honestly a good card if you're trying to play more of a pure Despia engine for sure. And then we're running a second copy of the Ecclesia the Virtuous, just in case if 1 isn't enough and you want to get to her quicker. That's why she's there. And then we're running a 3rd Masquerade the Blazing Dragon. Also, I forgot to mention this, if your opponent just happens to destroy a monster on your field, I think it is only a Despia monster, he can special himself back to the field or so forth. Or if they deal damage to you, it's one of the 2. And then we are running a second copy of Despia Inquiritus. I know I said 1 is only mandatory, but 2, because you can never have enough. And then we are playing 1 copy of the Predator Plant Triphyverturtum, or however you say his name. And basically, he takes 3 dark monsters. And what he does is gain attack equal to the original attack of all the monsters on the field with predator counters. You can only use the following effects of Predator Plant Triphyverturtum once per turn, or Trip. We're just going to call it Trip because why not? And when the first effect is when your opponent special summons a monster from your extra deck, while you control this fusion monster, quick effect, you can negate the summon, and if you do, destroy that monster. So imagine if your opponent just tries the Baron Defleur, they counter Baron Defleur, and you have Dragon's Despia on the field, and it's like, nope, it gets destroyed. And then the last effect is, if your opponent controls a monster with a predator counter, you can special summon this card from your graveyard. So therefore, if your opponent just so happens to have predator counters because of Dragon's Despia, this card basically says, I'm back! Pretty much is basically what he's saying. And then we only run 1 copy of the first Dark Lord for the rest of the monster engine or extra deck engine. And basically what the first Dark Lord does is you can fuse 3 Dark Fairy monsters, and if you just so happen to fuse it with the Dark Lord Morningstar, it just basically nukes the entire field, all your opponent. It just nukes all the cards in your opponent's field. And also, your opponent cannot target fairy monsters you control with card effects, so basically it is a walking shield for effects. And you can only use one of the following effects of Dark Lord Morningstar once per turn. That was the first effect, or second effect, actually. The first effect is, if this card is... Actually, no, that was the first effect. I got that confused. Ugh. Second effect states, during the main phase, quick effect, you can pay 1,000 life points to special summon a fairy monster from your hand or graveyard defense position. And since Aluber is a fairy monster, imagine continuously special summoning her to the point where you're actually just getting constant searches every turn. That would be a freaking headache, now that I think about it. Then another copy of Branded Lost, because 2 copies are definitely better for the meantime. Then I'm playing a second copy of Branded in Red, a second Greater Polymerization in case someone just so happens to answer my question. I can switch out normal poly for that. And then we're running 3 Dark Ruler No More just to screw with their field. The 1 branded Retribution, and then we are running the 1 branded Sword. And that is pretty much it for the rest of the cards, and then we are playing our 5 tokens as well that correspond with the branded Sword, of course. But yes, that is it for the most part, and that is it for this deck. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know your thoughts on this deck. Is it too good? Is it not too good? Could it be better? I'm sure it can be better. And would you guys advise I try something different with the deck besides Dark Lord Toolbox Engine? But then again, that is still severely hit to my understanding, so that is a no-go for sure. But yes, that is it for the deck for sure. Thank you guys for watching once again. This is your boy, Hidden Angel Lionheart, about to sign out here shortly. Please let me know in the comment section below how you guys think I did with this video. Was it good? Was it not good? Is there anything else I can do to improve to make this better? Or, I'm sure there is, but you guys know what I mean. But anyway, be sure to hit that like button and smash that subscribe button and let me know your thoughts on this deck, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it. So the next video, you guys take care, be safe, and yeah. And I'm going to endure a thunderstorm for the night. So, y'all have a good night. Y'all take it easy, and I'm outie. Peace.